Today we're going to be building something with the most meme-ish front-end library and the about to release, about to get out there Node alternative / JavaScript runtime / package manager / module bundler / npm tool. Anyway, this is what we're going to build. We're going to build a little to-do app after we've gone through all the basics of Bun and what it can do and showing some examples in code and everything. So I hope you enjoy the video. Let's get started. As you can see, Bun is about to hit 1.0 in the releases, which means that it would be stable. It's set to be released on the 7th of September and today is the 6th. So we should be very close to a version that is actually very close to 1.0. So I thought let's just make a quick little crash course video on everything that you can do with Bun and what it's for. Working with Bun is a lot like working with Node. It basically takes a JavaScript file and executes it. Bun is a JavaScript or TypeScript runtime. It transpiles your TypeScript to JavaScript and then runs the code. But it aims to be more than just a runtime. It wants to be able to bundle code. It has a built-in test runner. It has a Node compatible package manager that can install packages from npm. It can run executable packages with bunx. So today we'll just be going through everything and see what's possible. So let's get started. Installing Bun is pretty simple. All you have to do is run a curl command and this will install Bun, the latest available version, and you have the Bun executable in your binaries. So as of today, the Bun runtime executable is not available for Windows just yet. The Bun team seems to be working really hard to get it Windows ready for 1.0. So I'm working on a Windows machine currently, but I'm running the Windows subsystem for Linux. Hopefully that the Windows release gets out quickly and you'll be able to run it natively in your actual command line on Windows itself. If you run this command, which you can find on their homepage, bun.sh, it will install Bun. I've already run this command, so I'm going to show you that it is available by doing bun-v, and it shows that I'm on version 0.7.0. But if you noticed on the homepage, they are already at 0.8.1. So what I'm going to do is show you how you can upgrade Bun once you've installed it before. And the only way to do that is to just do Bun upgrade. And it'll install the latest version of Bun pretty quickly. Now that I've upgraded Bun, we can check that I'm on the latest version. And this should be 1.0 by tomorrow or the day after that. But for now, if we want to start a new Bun project, we can simply do Bun init and it will initialize the folder that you're currently in. As you can see, I'm in the Bun folder, so it will initialize the project in this folder. And the package name will just be Bun. I'll call it Bun tutorial, just so that it doesn't conflict. The entry point is index.tx. I'm going to make it source index.tx. And then it just initializes your project. So for us to check out this project, I'm going to be using NeoVim today to explore the code contents. You can use VS Code or Microsoft Visual Studio, whatever you want to use. So you'll see that the project has initialized with a few files. The source file is the one I indicated that just has the console.log that we specified. If we want to check out the other things, so bun.logb is the same as your package.log.json, except it's in a binary format. So you can't really read what's going on there. So if we look at the tsconfig, you'll see that they specified some sane defaults that they think you should use, which is fine. And the important thing is that they installed this bun types, and that would make Bun available in your file, and you'll see what that means. So how do we execute a file in Bun? The easiest way to do, in my command line now, and as you know, the file that is open in the top buffer is in source index.ts. So to execute a TypeScript file, you can just do bun run and then the path of the file. And then it just logs out hello via Bun. And this means that you can run TypeScript files directly, which is much different than Node, where you have to install a different TSC or TSUp or something to first transpile your TypeScript into JavaScript and then execute it. So with Bun, you don't need to do that. It just transpiles it for you and runs it immediately. This means you can just run a file immediately without having to transpile it. So let's look at scripts. We'll go to the package.json and you'll see that there aren't any scripts right now. So I'll add some scripts that we can test out the Bun command with. And this is just a simple dev script for now, but we'll get to what that does. So we're in this folder. If we do bun run dev, it runs the dev script in our package.json. If we want to know what commands we have in our scripts, we can do bun run, and then it tells us it has one script, the bun run dev, which runs bun run source index.ts. Another very cool Bun command is the Bun create command. So what Bun create does is it uses a template to initialize a project. We can do it by running something like bun create next, which is a Next.js app, and we want to put that in app. If you want to use one of your own templates or someone's GitHub repository, you can do something like username/repo. And that will try and find this repository and then clone that into the /app folder. So what we'll do is we'll just try and create a next one. So it's just fetching Next.js and it's downloading it and then installing the dependencies. Bun install is quite a bit faster than the npm install, especially when you already have installed certain packages before. I don't think I ever installed Next on this Linux system, so that's probably why the downloads are taking a little bit longer. But that is pretty much still quite fast. So now we can go to the app folder and you'll see an entire Next.js project. So outside of running JavaScript and TypeScript files, Bun can also run TSX and JSX files. So now that we have Bun, we can actually just go to our project, and in the index.tsx file, it's giving me some errors, but I believe this should still work. Let's go back to our terminal and then just run bun run source and index.ts. And you can see it, not index.ts, sorry, index.tsx. And there you go. So it's logging out the component, and Bun has a built-in sort of interpreter thing to make sure that this is formatted well in the output. But if you use this in a framework or transpile it to HTML or whatever, then you'll see that the output is valid JavaScript and not this JSX string. So now we'll look at some of the cool things that you can do with the global Bun. The first thing we'll look at is just the, let me just remove that, is just the Bun global. And Bun has a ton of things that you can do on the global Bun object. But today, or for now, we'll just look at the build command. And the build command accepts entry points. And what this does is it's basically sort of like a package, like a module, like sort of like Webpack and Vite. It takes an input file and then looks at all of its dependencies and compiles it together into a single JavaScript file in a folder that you sort of give it. So what we'll look at is source and then index.tsx. And I'm in the source folder now, but the entry point will be relative to the current working directory, which will be bun. So if I have to specify an out directory, and I'll just make that bold. And then we can close this off and write that file. And then we'll just run bun run source index.ts. And indeed, if we go to our root directory, you'll see there's a build folder with a index.js, and you can see that it has transpiled all of the code into a single file that we can run. And this is quite lengthy because it has probably compiled React into the same file. So what if we don't want to compile React into this? What do we do then? So what we can do is we can go to source index.ts, and then we can give it some externals. So the external that I want is React. So please don't bold React into my project, but just leave it as a separate dependency. So now we can go back to our build folder, and index.js should be, see now it's just importing React, and it's not it's importing from React, and it's not compiling the entire React framework. So this file is only 15 lines long now because it's not compiling React into this file. So the build API is pretty cool if you just want to compile your project into some JavaScript programmatically. Another cool thing you can do with Bun build is you can run it from the CLI. You can do something like bun build and then give it an entry point. Let's say CLI.ts, and then give it an out file, and we're gonna say my CLI, and then you just say compile. And what this does is it actually builds a single binary that you can run from your system. And for this to work, it has to compile bun into the binary itself. So the binary would be pretty big, but we can test it out just to show you. If we create a new file, I'm just going to do it in the root. I'm going to say my CLI.ts. Let's give it a shebang. We'll say user bin env node, or let's be explicit and say bun. And then we can say just console.log hello from bun binary. You can write that file and then go to our terminal. So what we want to do is we want to say bun build the mycli.ts, and we want to give it an out file, which would be the full binary. We'll just call it mycli, and then we'll say compile. And this took about 100 milliseconds. So if we go back to our source code now, you can see that there is an executable called mycli, and if we open this up, it's going to be an ALF file binary executable. So we can go back to that, and we can actually try and execute that in our terminal. So we can just do // mycli, and there you go, hello from bun binary. You get quite a big binary file because it has to compile bun into the file itself. Another cool thing you can do with bun is run bunx. So bunx is the same as npx, so you can do something like bunx cow say hello, and then if you run that, first it's going to look for cow say either locally or on npm, and I don't have it installed yet, so it's just fetching it, and then now it just logged out hello from cow say. So now let's look at some of the cool Bun APIs that we can use. So we can start with the thing that we love the most as JavaScript web developers, is creating a HTTP server. So firstly, I'm gonna import just a type called serve options from Bun, and then I'm the way you create a server is you say bun.serve and then the options, and I'm just going to say as serve options. And this is just to make my LSB shut up a little bit. So if I do the way you define a server, I'm going to make some space here, is the property, the only property that's necessary is the fetch property. And this is exactly the same as fetch in your browser. Well, it's not exactly the same, but the APIs on it are the same. I'm going to make this asynchronous though. And then fetch takes takes one or provides one argument, and that's the request. And the type of this request is request, as in the request type that you actually use in the Web Standards API. So I can look at the documentation for this. You can see that it uses that same request object that you would see even in the browser when you do fetch and get the request back at the URL. So we could say like the const URL equals request.url, and what we actually want to do is just convert this to a actual Web Standards URL by doing request.url. And then for now what we'll do is we'll just print out or respond with the URL. So we can do return new response url.href. And that should create a server for us. So let's run the server in this command. I mean in this terminal. We can say bun run dev, because remember we've mapped source index.ts to the dev script, and you can see that it's listening. We aren't printing anything out, but it is listening, and we can test that by doing curl HTTP localhost 3000 by default, and it just returns the href. And if we curl /hello, it gives us the full URL back. And that's basically just a Bun HTTP server, and you can do quite a few cool things. For example, instead of just fetch, we can also do a error. So if something bad occurs, then we can do this. And let's just console.log the error, and then we'll return a new response saying oops. And then up here, instead of returning something, we don't have to actually have this as async. We can just say throw new error bad request, for example. And now we can run this again. And then in our other terminal, we can say curl again, and you'll say oops. And this oops comes from the response by the error, and then this one, it shows where the error happened based on this console.log. The other cool thing is that you can actually make this an HTTPS server. So similar to Node's HTTPS module, the way you do that is you give it a TLS property. And then in the TLS property, you can do key, and then we'll look at bun.file in a minute, but you basically just get your key.pem and your cert would be bun.file cert.pem. For example, you'll need to generate these certificates and the key, but this will tell Bun to use HTTPS instead of HTTP. Another cool thing you can do with Bun's API is you can create a WebSocket. So I'm going to create a new file called websocket.ts, and then in WebSocket it looks very similar to just creating a server, HTTP server. So you run bun.serve, And then in the serve function, we still have a fetch function that takes the request and the server. And then the way we specify to upgrade is by saying if server.upgrade the request. You can say don't do anything. Otherwise, we should return an error response. And we can give it a status as well of 500, which will indicate to the requester that this is a bad request. And now that we have that, we should be able to go down here. Let me just close off this before I forget. And now what we can do is define a WebSocket field. And WebSocket has a few options. You have message, which basically is a function that runs whenever a message is received. You have open, that runs whenever a new connection is received. You have close, when a message is when a client that is connected closes down. And you have drain, when the socket is ready to receive more data. But for now, let's just worry about open and message. So for open, I'm just gonna say console.log a new client connected, and I'm also gonna add the message, which receives the WebSocket and the message. We'll console log the message that comes through, and then once the message comes through, we'll send back some text that just says hello from Bun WebSocket. And that should do it. I've closed down the terminal just because the file is zoomed in a lot, so the editor doesn't look very good. I'm going to use the normal terminal, and we're going to run bun run source WebSocket.ts, because that's where I wrote this code. So now the WebSocket should be listening, and we can actually test that out with a browser console. So we can say, and let's put this in here too, because we are logging some stuff. Let's split it up like this. So let's say const ws2 equals new WebSocket, and the address will be localhost 3000. And you can see a new client connected because the WebSocket is now live. So let's do ws2.add event listener message, I think. Let's do data console.log the data. Believe that's how it works. And then we post a message, because what's going to happen is if the client sends a message, the WebSocket on this side will just respond with hello from Bun. So let's see. So we can do ws2.send hello. Boom, you can see the server received hello, and the message event came back, and you can see the data is hello from Bun WebSocket. So I mean, that's how you create WebSockets in an extremely timely manner. Alright, so now that we've dealt with HTTP servers and WebSockets, let's look at some file operations. So I'm just going to make a file called files.ts, and then what I'll do is let's read a file. Let's do read a file, and then all you have to do is const file equals bun.file, and because we're in the root directory, I'll just say package.json, and in order to maybe display it, I'm gonna say let's first transform this. The contents of this file would be await file.json. because we know this is a JSON file, and we can safely parse that as JSON. So let's check this out. We can go to Bun and do bun run source files.ts, and you can see this is our current package.json. So how about if we want to write files? I think let's read this file, transform it, and then write it back. So we already have the contents now, and what we want to do is take these contents and then see if it has a scripts field, and if it does, so let's do if content.scripts. We can just say content.scripts dot, let's do start equals bun run source and then files.ts, and we don't have the name content. Okay, so let's just do contents and contents. All right, so now what we want to do is write it back. So we could say bun.write, and we'll give it the package.json again, and we'll stringify the contents. And that should do it. So you read files by doing bun.file, and you write files by doing bun.write. Let's do that same command again. Let's see the package.json now. And you can see that it successfully added the start script. So now instead of doing all that, we can just do bun run start. So while we're on the topic of files, I think it's a good place to talk about file paths, because there's a few things in Node that we have that we didn't have in the, or that we had in Node that isn't a thing now. For example, let me just clear all this out. Actually, I'll just continue down here. So in Bun, there is a thing called import.meta. And import.meta has the directory that you're currently in, the URL, the file, main, and that is to check if the current executing file is what it is. So let's just log a few of these out. So let's say console.log. And what I'm going to do is just extract these. I'm going to say const equals import.meta. So what we can say is the file, the path, the directory, the main, the, what else is there? I think let's start with those. Let's see if we're missing something. Resolve is just to find a module or a path. Oh, the URL. And let's just log all those out. And I know there's a clash with file. I'll fix that now. Instead of file, let's do the file or something. And let's run this again and see what it outputs. So now we can run bun and start. And you can see that the file that it gives is the files.ts. That is the currently executed file where this code basically runs from. The path where the code runs from is from my home user bun source files. The directory is which directory is this file in, and you can see that it's main because this is the actual file that's being executed by bun, and then the URL is this full URL. And you'll use these properties if you want to sort of replace dir name or file name that is available in Node. So in Node you would probably do something like dir name, and you can see that it's crossed out. Let's see if I can get some LSP information for that. So it's deprecated, please use import.meta.dia instead. So very cool that they add that message. But there is another cool way that you can sort of write to files, and that is like in an asynchronous way. So we could say like, let's first go back and create just a test file in here. So I'll just do test.txt and write that file with nothing in it, and then go back to files, and then let's say the file path. So now we know how to check the path, so we could do let's try this. So const txt path other things. I'm just gonna basically concatenate that. So I'm gonna say the import.meta.directory, and please give me the test.txt, and then let's check what that gives us. Alright, so we got the path to the file that we want now. So what we wanted to do is we want to sort of create a asynchronous writer. So the plan here is that I want to open a sort of writer that stays open, write some stuff, do some stuff, write some more stuff, and then we can flush the writer, which commits it, and then we can just close it. So the way we open a writer is we can say the file first. We need the file. Const file equals bun.file.txt, and then the writer we can get by file.writer. Let's write some stuff into it. We can say writer.write, I think, something, and we don't. So this is asynchronous, or sort of the handle to the file stays open. So while it's busy writing, we can say still writing, and we can write some more stuff. And then to commit this, let's first add a wrote some more stuff, and we can do just the last one. Finishing. Now we want to flush the writer by saying writer.flush, and then we can close the writer by saying writer.end, and then we can do just gzz. So first we open the file, we get the writer from that file. We write something, we log something, we write something, we log something, we close the writer, we do that. And this is an important step, because if you don't close your handle, you might get a memory leak or something. So let's see what happens. We should be able to just run this again. So still writing, that's after the first one, wrote some more stuff, and then finishing. And then now we should be able to see everything that we wrote, something else. One of the cool things about using web APIs instead of, let's say, file, in Node.js you would have like a file type or a different buffer type or whatever, where using web APIs, you can, for example, we could say something like bun.write And the thing about write is it writes files if you give it a file path, but also you can say something like bun.stdout and then some content to stdout. And if you run that, stdout should be the main console. So let's just go back. And you can see it wrote to stdout, which is your console. So bun.write doesn't just accept files, it accepts anything that has. So you can see stdout is a instance or a type of bun file. So now I'm back in the source directory. I'm going to create a new file called database.ts. And I call this database because we're going to look at Bun's built-in sort of SQlite stuff, which is kind of cool. So the way you can create a database in Bun is you just import database from, I think it's Bun SQlite. Let's just check. I think this might just be my LSB going crazy. So we can just do const db equals new database, and then we could do a query. So we could say const query equals db.query. So it does recognize this. Select hello as message. And then we need to run that query. So we can do query.get. And let's do const results equals query.get. And then we want to console.log that. So we can run that file with bun run source database.ts. And you can see message hello. So it automatically formats it into JavaScript objects. And this database thing up here could either be this, or it could be empty, or it could say memory, which all mean the same thing. It just creates an in-memory database, so nothing gets written to files. But if you want to have it written to files, you could say db.sqlite. And this should probably fail now because I don't have a file like that unless it creates it. Okay, so it does. So if I do, yeah, you can see I have a db.sqlite that it created for me. So now that database actually exists in the file system. Alright, so let's look at another cool example of stuff you can do with Bun. The one API that's pretty cool is the file system router. So in order to create a new file system router, we can say that the router is equal to a new bun.FileSystemRouter. And this takes a couple of options. The first one being the style. And that'll be Next.js because that's the only supported style for now. And directory. And you probably won't be using this API much. This is more for like library developers, but it's still cool to know that this exists. And we're going to tell it to look at the pages directory in the project root. So that's the options that we need. And then in order to match something, we can just say router.match/. And then that will give us some information. But in order for this to work, we first need to go to our root directory, and then I've already created a pages directory. We just need to add a index.tsx. And in this index.tsx, we're going to export a default function called app. It takes a prop, or it takes props, that is basically just a message with a string. And then all we're doing is returning JSX with the props.message. And we can maybe add just a little exclamation mark. And don't worry about the linting errors. That's fine for now. So we can go back to our file system router, and this is called FileSystemRouter.tsx because we will be doing some TSX stuff in there. So now we have this router. We can actually already test this out by just going to, and we probably want to log this first. So console.log the match, and we can do const the match equals that. And then what we'll do is we'll run bun run source file system router.tsx. And you can see that it gives us the matched file. It knows we just gave it the /, and you can probably think where this might be handy, but then it gives us the exact location of that file and some other parameters and stuff. Then finally, I'm going to look at some testing stuff before we maybe build like a cool little app from scratch. Firstly, I'm going to create a new file called testing.ts, and Bun ships with its own test runner, which is very cool. So you can see how with all these tools and stuff that we used, you get firstly you get the speed. You get node compatibility, which I haven't talked about, but in Bun, you technically can do something like write file sync from fs, and I would suggest just doing node fs, just to make it clear that where this is coming from. This will still run in Bun because Bun is trying to be fully node compatible. There are maybe a few things that aren't fully compatible yet, but so far they're doing a great job. But so we have a package manager, we have like an executable runner, we have a transpiler, we have a builder, we have a sort of anything that you can really think of. And so one thing that is really needed is a test runner, and of course Bun ships with that. We can write a basic test. We can say that import expect and test from Bun test, not that. And then we just write a simple test, test 1 + 1. We could say that we expect 1 + 1 to be 2, and that's a passing test. And I believe we have to rename this file, so let's go back to testing, because Bun looks for anything with a .test or .spec or ._test or whatever extension. So let's rename this to testing.test.ts, and then go back in there, and then we can try and run Bun test. So let's do clear Bun test, and you can see that ran in 22 milliseconds, very small test, but tells you that the test passed. So let's have a failing test. Let's do like test 1 + 2. We could say that we expect 1 + 2 to be, let's say 4, because we want this test to fail on purpose. So let's run test again, and you can see 1 failed, 1 + 2 tells me which one failed, expected received to be expected, and we get nice syntax highlighting, tells you where it happened, and yeah, that's great. So we have a test runner. Alright, so the time has come to build a little kind of useless app. It's not very fancy, but it's gonna use a lot of the concepts that we've discussed. So we can add some to-dos, add another to-do. If we refresh the page, it will load the to-dos, and yeah, that's about all it does now. but it uses some of the concepts that we've discussed, so let's get right into it and build it from scratch. And also the thing is, we'll try to use as few dependencies as possible. So except for HTMX for the front end stuff and just a little CSS library to make things look good without having to write a lot of styles. And yeah, I think that's most of our dependencies. We'll also use React to render the JSX into HTML, but we'll get to that. Alright, so to get started, let's initialize a brand new Bun app with bun init. Let's just call this example Bun project. Actually, let's first create that repository, that directory, by doing bun example app, cd into that, bun example app, and then now we can do bun init. We'll keep all the same defaults, and then I'll open this up in my code editor. Again, you can use VS Code if you want. I'm just going to use this. So to get started, first of all, the Bun app is just a simple console.log, but what we'll do is we'll create a new index.html file. That is the base file that will be sent back to the client. So I'm going to create a new base HTML, and then we'll just change the title to, let's say, Bun HTMX, because this will use HTMX in the HTML side. And then I'm gonna copy some scripts and links that we need in the HTML just for some styling and to actually have HTMX. So let me just get that. And there we go. So basically what we've added, the first script is HTMX itself. The second script is hyperscript. That's just like a scripting language within HTMX, I think. And the last one is JSON encode. So we can tell HTMX to send our form data as JSON instead of X, WW, URL, blah, blah, you know, all the normal form data. So just to get started, I'm going to create a header. I might actually just create the header and then I'll talk you through it when I've finished. So far what I've created was just a header that will display some intro text and then this body main. So for the body main, this is where our form will go, and then the list of current to-dos. Alright, so we have our bare HTML right now, and what we'll do first is we'll write the Bun server to serve up this HTML. So to do that, let's go back to the index.ts, and I'm going to actually rename index.ts to index.tsx because we'll be using some JSX in there. So let's go to index.tsx, and then the first thing we'll do is we'll basically just serve up this HTML. So let's create a Bun server. We'll just say bun.serve, like we've seen this before. And we'll do a host of localhost and a port of 8080. And then for fetch, I'm going to write a function that basically the name is just handler. So we'll need that function. And in order to have that, we can just write that down here. We'll say function handler, and this handler will accept the request. and it will return a response. And to get started, let's make sure for failsafe case, we'll say return a new response of not found, and then a status of 404. This is when none of the routes that we are going to write match. This is what it will look like. And host is not the correct key. It is supposed to be host name. Alright, so let's also pass out the request URL. So we can say const URL equals a new URL from the request.url. So that's what our handler looks like for now. After running bun.serve, let's log out to the console. So let's create the server. We'll store this in a variable, and then we'll say console.log listening on HTTP. Then we can do server.hostname and server.port. So that will log out that the server is listening. So we can test this out. So we can run bun run index.ts. Oh, we don't have, so bun run index.tsx. And you can see that the app is listening on 8080. So I'll just open up the current app, and you'll see that we receive not found because that's the only route that we have. So if we refresh, that's still the case. So let's fix that by adding the first route. And this is just for sort of demonstrative purposes. You probably won't write your server like this. You'll probably use something like Elysia, which I'll link in the description, or Hono, which is also very good, that you can have like an express type structure to your app. But for now, we'll literally just look at the URL and respond. And if we don't recognize the URL, then we send nothing. So we're going to say that if the URL.pathname is equal to that, or the URL.pathname is equal to that, we'll just return a new response, and we'll be using some of the Bun APIs now. Bun.file index.html. So we can restart our server, and then we can refresh our web page. And there we go. So we have a very nicely, not very nicely, but at least something to look at on the page. But these don't do anything for now. You can see it just posts to the current URL, and we want to fix that. So to fix that, we can go back to our index.html. The first thing we want to do is on the form, we're going to say that this is a hx post, and this will post to to-dos, and the target would be the to-dos, the thing with the to-dos ID. So we'll do hx target is equal to hashtag to-dos. And then we've installed the hyperscript script over here, so we can use that in the form just to make it easier to refresh. So what we'll do is we'll say that firstly we have to say the hx extension, which is the other library that we're importing up here, that we can say JSON-enc. We can write that, and then for the hyperscript thing, let me just maybe format these a little bit better. Alright, so then the last one would be that hyperscript. And to run a hyperscript, you basically just do this underscore, and then I'm going to say on submit target.reset. And you can read up on Hyperscript. I'm not a professional in Hyperscript. This is basically the first time that I'm writing it, so yeah, I can't give you any advice on that. I literally just took this from the documentation. It basically just says once the form submits, then just reset the form's input so that whatever you submit, it doesn't stay in there. So we can actually already try that out. Let's save that and then open up the terminal again and restart the server. And then go back to our application, refresh. And if we submit something, test, you'll see nothing happens, because if we check it out, it's going to say not found, because it's a route and a method that we haven't explicitly listened for. So let's add that. So let's go back to the index.tsx, and then we can add a new line and say if the URL dot path name is equals to /todos, and the method, the request.method, is equal to post, we want to return a new response of something. So what is that something? And this is actually where we'll add one dependency in for our server, but this is just to render a string. We'll be using the built-in JSX stuff too. So let's clear this out. I'm gonna add bun add react DOM, and I'm gonna just add the types for that too. Add types react and add types react DOM, and that it's stalled in 3 seconds. Alright, so if we go back up here, we can say import render to string from react DOM server. And what we'll do now is at the bottom of our page, we'll create a new function that is called to-do list. And this is going to take props, which will have a to-dos item. And for now, that's just going to be an ID, which is a number, and a text, which is a string. Whoops. And that has to be an array actually. Let's just return a UL. And in here, we'll check the different stuff. So we'll actually open these brackets up, and then we'll say props dot length question mark. I mean props dot todos dot length. And then we'll, if they are props, we'll do a map over them. And then we'll return the ally with the todo.text. Otherwise, we'll just return no items added. Alright, so if there are to-dos, then we'll list them out. Otherwise, we'll just say no to-dos added. So in this response, we could say render to string the to-do list. And for now, let's just say the to-dos are equal to just an empty array. And that broke everything. I think I need a Alright, so now it'll just use an empty array, and we can start the server back up now. Let's do bun run index.ts x, and then let's reload the page, and now we should see no items added, which we don't, because on initial load we have to tell HTMX. So let's go to the to-do section, and then what we'll do is insert, and then on this one we'll add an hx get with /todos, and let's save that, then go back to our server. We'll basically just copy this and we'll say at the end, if the method is get, we do the same thing. And I'm not putting it as or over here because we will be changing the post, because we need to add new to-dos and stuff. Actually, before that, we have to do we have to tell this thing that it should trigger on load instead of on click. Let's save that, and we can try refreshing the server one more time. And we can also, then after refreshing the server, we can reload, and then you'll see that no items added. Perfect. So next, what we want to do is just actually create this item in the post. So first of all, we want to go to the top and just have like a global to-dos. And this will be an array. Let's go steal that type again. We'll delete that, then we'll go up here and we'll just create a new type. And this type will be a to-do array. And this type over here will also be a to-do array. Perfect. So now we have to-dos. What we want to do is we want to, when it's a post request, we want to actually create that to-do. So I'm going to add a bit of logic over here. We have to check the request body. So to do that, we can say, like we've seen in the tutorial, we can say, what do I want to do? Okay, so the to-do will be in the request body. So we can say equals await request.json. And now this needs to be an async function. And it can't return a response, it has to return a promise of a response. And now we can get the to-do, and we can do some sanity checking. We can just be simple and say if no to-do.length, return new response, invalid input with a status maybe of 500. Okay, so now we know that there is a to-do. What do we want to do with that to-do? We're going to push it into the to-dos array. And we can say that to-dos.push, the ID would be to-dos.length +1. And the text would be the to-do. because the text is the only thing being sent from the browser. And now in this part, we can say to-dos. Perfect. So let's restart our server and see if we can actually add a to-do. Boom, we actually get a response back, but we also have an error. Each child list should have a key prop. Okay, so this is like a React thing, I think. We can basically just go to this thing, and then in the li, we can say key equals the to-do.id. And all of this is being generated on the server. There's no React code being sent back to the client. It's basically just being rendered as a string on the server and sent back as a string. All right, so we added that key. That should clear the error. Let's just make sure. Let's refresh this page. I've just restarted the server, so no more to-dos. We've got test and no errors. We can do test 2 or test 3. But now the problem is if we refresh, no more to-dos, because we have to fix that in the get method as well. We can just give it the to-dos, because the to-dos start off as an empty array, so that should be fine. So if I refresh now, I haven't, but I have to restart the server one more time. So no hot module reload and stuff like that. This is bare metal programming. All right, so we can do test. If I refresh, test should still be there. So it's fetching it on load as well. Test 2 or test 3, whatever. Refresh, still there. And if you want, instead of having this to-dos thing over there, what you can do is use SQlite to save it temporarily in a database or something like that. And I think for the code that I'll push up to GitHub, the link would be in the repository. I'll have a small example using the SQlite. But other than that, I hope this video wasn't too all over the place or confusing. But anyway, thanks for watching. I will see you guys in the next one, which will hopefully be soon.